learn the basics of pro wrestling, and we will be giving interviews from the best pro wrestlers. Right now, sitting right next to me is Vince Valor, ESW pro wrestler. Tell us about yourself.
Tell us about me. I'm a pro wrestler of 11 years. Trained in Canada, wrestled all across the country, won championships, wrestled some of the best in the world, and now I'm here training you guys.
And we couldn't be more grateful. To start you off in this interview, I have to ask, what is pro wrestling to you?
Pro wrestling to me is an art form, and this isn't my word as law, this is just my perspective on it. Pro wrestling is an art form, much like any form of entertainment. It portrays a story of good versus evil. It's a physical form of combat. We tell stories in here. We tell stories with our bodies.
All right, Vince, could you tell us your journey to pro wrestling? You don't just come off into the scene, this big pro wrestler. Tell us how you got there.
It doesn't happen overnight, and everybody, when they're asked this, they give the cliche answer of, oh, I was a fan since I could walk. I saw Hulk Hogan on the TV and I was hooked, brother. That's not true at all. People say that answer because they feel that they have to. For me, my pro wrestling journey was very different. I didn't know about it until I was maybe 6, 7 years old, until I went to this daycare that my mother brought me to. All the kids there were into it. They had all the videos and the action figures and the video games. And it turned into this little fight club in the basement. My mother got a call that I had a kid in the Boston Crab, and she wasn't too happy about it. But she knew that I had fallen in love with it, and pro wrestling is something that I never grew out of. I've loved it ever since. My journey began training alongside 8 of my good friends in Rochester, New York. We would pack 8 of us into a small Nissan Altima and train there twice a week until, at that time, I was juggling a lot. I was going to school, I was in a serious relationship. I wanted to make sure that I could put all my focus and energy into wrestling, so I put a lot of that to the side. Dropped out of college, lost a relationship, lost cars, lost jobs. I've given a lot to wrestling, but that led me to my training place in Niagara Falls, Ontario, Canada. I trained under some of the very best in the world there. Tiberius King, Sean Spears, Primo Scordino, Scotty Turner. And they taught me a lot, not only about the moves and movements in wrestling, but how to tell a story and how to engage an audience, how to create moments over maneuvers. I credit them for everything. I wouldn't be who I am without Tiberius King. He's taught me everything I know, but it wasn't easy. It was a matter of, wrestlers have it very easy these days to where they can train once a month or once a week and that's it. I trained 4 nights a week. I went in, it wasn't just training, it was going to the shows every weekend, setting up the rings, putting up the flyers, taking down the flyers, doing everything that it took to become a pro wrestler. And I'm grateful for where I trained because it taught me discipline so that I could be the best I could be.
A follow-up question, what was your first wrestling match? Like, who were the first people that you remember seeing go at it in the ring?
The first people I remember seeing? The first one that comes to mind was my very first indie show, and this is back when I was a student in Rochester. My trainer at the time, formerly known as Gabriel Saint, now Cameron Akasha Black, she went to battle with Big League John McChesney in the heavyweight championship match. That was one of my first memories of independent wrestling, of like when I was around. But I was also grateful enough to share locker rooms with the late Brody Lee. He was one of the first people I met in the locker room. I mean, those were some of the first people that I met, and that stuck with me a long way. But that was in Rochester, and then when I got over to Canada, I started to meet people who had been so successful there. Jake O'Reilly, Cody Diener, Tyson Dukes, who I've learned so much from. And to be able to learn from these guys and like take whatever wealth of knowledge they were willing to share. So that was when I made my way back over to the Buffalo scene, and I'd be able to get and share locker rooms with guys like Brandon Thurston, Pepper Parks, guys I've learned so much from. So, I mean, these are some of the names that I like. That was sort of my introduction into wrestling, was sharing locker rooms with these guys.
All right, Vince. I want to know who your favorite opponent is, who you had the best chemistry with, best ring psychology, best match. Who do you feel like that person is?
I have 3 answers for this because I get asked this question a lot. people often base it off of who they had a banger with, who they felt they had the best match with that way. I base my matches off the story that we told and the money that we drew. First one that comes to mind is Big Time Bill Collier, my brother-in-law. He and I wrestled a year-long feud in Erie, Pennsylvania. This is at a time where fans were starting to get smartened up to things, and they began to sit in the front row with their arms crossed. Oh, that's fake. I don't believe that. I don't believe anything they're doing. No, we made them believe. We drew money. We told a story. And for the fans or the workers or anything like that want to believe that kayfabe's dead, we brought life to it with the stories that we told. He's someone that I credit for a lot of who I am as a wrestler. I have great chemistry with him. I've always had great matches with him. We just tell great stories. Another guy that I've told great stories with in the ring is Brandon Thurston. Arguably the best technical wrestler in and around Buffalo, New York. He and I had a rivalry that spanned probably around 3 to 4 years around the Southern Tier area. He and I had always crossed paths but never wrestled each other until I believe it was the summer of 2017. And we had, for our first time wrestling, we had such a great match that 1 year later they advertised as the rematch, and then 1 year later after that it was for a company, Southern Tier Wrestling, that hadn't been around that long, but I feel that Vince Valor versus Brandon Thurston was the rivalry that company was built on, because it was a match that you could always revisit and it was always going to deliver. We told such great stories. Summer of 2019, I feel that he and I had some of the best performances. It furthered my ability to tell a captivating story to an audience. Over that summer, we probably wrestled each other maybe 11, 12 times over a 2-3 month span. We wrestled each other twice in the same day once for 2 different championships. I mean, it was a big deal. And then another personal favorite of mine is Cloudy, who used to wrestle for Ring of Honor and Chikara. One of the most underrated wrestlers around the New York scene. Such a wealth of knowledge. He's somebody that I've always just developed such great chemistry with. Anytime anybody asks me, who do you want to wrestle, it's always Cloudy. I'll wrestle Cloudy any day of the week, and I know we'll always have great matches.
How would you explain in-ring psychology to somebody new in pro wrestling?
Understanding that this is an art of storytelling. This isn't just coming out here and doing moves back and forth just because we can. And the way I find wrestling these days is a lot of guys base their matches off that. They plan out a script. I hit this move, you hit this move, and then we both do a move, and then the audience doesn't care. People need to understand that there's an audience that most wrestling shows on an independent level, Fridays and Saturday nights, these people could be doing anything. They could be having date night, they could be at the movies, bowling, out for drinks, anything. They chose to come to a wrestling show, make it worth their while, understand there's an audience that paid to see this, and tell them that captivating story. A lot of people look at wrestling as an escape, and for workers or for fans, they want to escape their troubles of everyday life. They want to suspend their disbelief for a couple hours. Tell that story to them. Don't come in here and just focus on moves and maneuvers and hitting your high spots. This is meant to tell the story of good versus evil. Make that relative to an audience. A lot of times people will rush a million miles an hour, and that's hard for anybody to keep up with, whether you're in the ring or you're watching as a spectator. Make this digestible to your audience to where they can understand and relate to it and bite on the story that you're telling them.
Now, what is the best example of in-ring psychology, whether it be a match, a wrestler? Who do you think did it best?
This is a personal favorite of mine because it's my personal favorite wrestler, Eddie Guerrero. One of my favorite matches that stood out to me. Eddie Guerrero was a guy that he had such great in-ring work, promos, passion for the business, which you really can't teach. But he also had the ability that I would love for myself, and even 11 years into this, I'm still working on it, is the ability to have a great match with anybody. He could go out there and have a great match with a Kurt Angle or a Dean Malenko or a Rey Mysterio. But he was also able to have those great matches with a JBL or Brock Lesnar, which is who he won his one and only world championship from. That match stands out to me as Eddie Guerrero going into that as the underdog, telling a story throughout. And you look at the back of that match, they had a month, maybe less to build it. It wasn't like they had a year-long storyline going into it. But they told the story of Eddie Guerrero as the underdog going against his unstoppable beast Brock Lesnar. The story throughout, and to see that moment where Eddie Guerrero won the championship, he was a storyteller above all else. He was great in the ring. He could hit all the high spots, hit whatever move in the book, but he told a story to an audience, and that's what made him stand out as one of the greatest of all time.
All right, Vince. Who do you think had the best character to go with the wrestling? Everybody knows that wrestling takes so priority in wrestling, but the character brings it together. Who do you think had, or who has had, some of the best characters to go with the wrestling?
If everybody doesn't have the same answer, they're either in the wrong business or they're watching the wrong interview. The Undertaker stands head and shoulders above everybody else in the history of wrestling as the greatest character of all time. You can't find me anybody else that sold an audience the way he did. It made him believe everything that he was doing in and out of the ring, whether it be his promos, his in-ring work, his entrance. There's nobody else that gets such a reaction just based off their entrance, to where he gets multiple different reactions all throughout. When they hear the gong, when they see him, when the lights come up, when he does the eyes, when they say his name 5 times, he's getting a reaction all throughout. It's not just that initial pop from an audience and then they simmer down. That audience comes up every time, and it's always the same way every time. It's awesome to see. Undertaker made me believe as a wrestling fan, because any wrestling fan, they've grown up, oh, it's fake, they're not really hitting each other or anything like that. No, like Undertaker, the presence, the mystique of his character, he gave you something to believe in. There's no experience, and this is the fan of me talking, quite like seeing The Undertaker at WrestleMania Live. I was there in attendance at WrestleMania 29 which is his final match of keeping the streak alive. There's no experience like that, whether you know wrestling or not, to see that and have something to believe in. Undertaker's the greatest character of all time.
What do you think it takes to build a character so strong?
Investing yourself in it and protecting it. You hear the stories and you watch the documentaries and the interviews. Undertaker protected that character. He wasn't, yeah, he did his public appearances, but he was always dressed in black. He always kept that demeanor, always kept to himself. He wasn't going out making an ass out of himself to any fans. Like he was Undertaker. There was no off switch to that.
How would you describe the wrestling business in a whole?
Evolving. And there's a lot of old timers who get stuck in their ways and don't want to understand that this business evolves with the times, and you have to stay relevant, you have to stay fresh, you have to come up with new ideas and new theories, and understand that this business is about making money. This business is all about numbers. That's one of the great lessons that I learned, that I took with me. This business is about numbers. How much you got paid, how many people are in the crowd, how many matches have you had, how long have you been in the business, how long was your match. It's all numbers. Too many people treat wrestling like it's Ring of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. That's not how this works. You need to understand that these people are paying customers, and if you need to give them a reason to come back and pay for your product again the next month, and the month after that, and the month after that. If I like to treat wrestling like everybody in the audience is their first time being there. You want to give them a reason to come back. You don't want to turn them off to this and make them think any less of it than they already do. People already frown upon wrestling or mock it. Wrestling is the only mocked profession on earth. You don't see people mocking the fireman or the accountant. No, they mock the wrestler and think that it's a joke. So I don't want fans leaving the show that night thinking that it's a joke. I don't want to give them a reason to dump on this more than they already do. These fans are paying customers. You want them to come back. You want them to sell it, to buy the product that you're dishing out. And it's not just in the ring, but how you present yourself out of the ring as well. whether it be at the merchandise table or on social media, which is a big thing nowadays. You need to remain professional throughout, because if they see through that, then they're not going to buy what you do. A lot of guys will say, oh, there's no money in wrestling, let me just wrestle and go home. No, there's money to be made. I'm at a point where I'm not going to quit my job over this, but I can make enough money in one night wrestling to where that's more than what I make in a week at work. So there's money to be made. It's all a matter of how you present yourself as a professional.
You touched on social media. I was just going to ask, do you think social media has affected pro wrestling negatively?
Yes and no. Social media has made wrestling more exposed, and in good and bad ways. Wrestling's bigger than it ever has been because of how many social media outlets it hits. There isn't, as a wrestling fan or as a wrestler, you can't open social media and scroll through your timeline without seeing something wrestling related. It's reaching every audience, but it's affected it negatively in a way of the dirt sheets or the documentaries and movies and stuff that gets put out, to where fans think they read one thing and then they understand every in and out of the business. You won't understand this unless you're doing it. So I mean, that's the only way I feel that it's affected negatively, is not necessarily too bad. The dirt sheets are a news source, that's fine, but it gives fans that feeling like they know everything when they truly don't. Plus, you see a lot of the banter back and forth, whether it be on Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff between wrestlers, and that kind of exposes them as professionals to where maybe they shouldn't be doing this.
I think probably one of the most important parts, and you'll agree, to pro wrestling is selling. The aspect of making who you're in the ring with look good. Who do you think has some of the best selling that you've ever experienced, seen? Talk to us.
Not some of the best selling, the best selling, the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels. There's nobody in the history of the business that sells better than Shawn Michaels and makes you believe every movement that he's making. There's no wasted movement, no wasted motion. He's making his opponent look, regardless of who he's in the ring with. Shawn Michaels can make anybody look good.
What would you say his best-selling performance was?
Certainly not SummerSlam 2005, where he's overselling for Hulk Hogan. But I don't know if this is too much of Shawn selling or his ability as a performer in itself. But his WrestleMania 25 match with The Undertaker, he sold and you bit on every minute of that match, to where, in my opinion, it's the greatest match of all time.
Alrighty. Could you lay any advice on rookies getting into pro wrestling?
You'll hear a lot of old timers that will just tell you ears open, mouth shut, and that goes a very long way. Listen and take any advice you can, but also understand that this is very time consuming. If you want to take this as far as you can, to me, this isn't a hobby. This is my life. This is something I've done for my entire adult life since I was 17 years old. It's something that's on my mind constantly. Whether I'm at work, I'm thinking of ways I can better myself or better my students as wrestlers. I'm constantly in the gym. I'm watching wrestling, not as a fan, but studying it as a worker. I'm in the ring often 3 times a week to better my craft and to help others become better at theirs. This will consume a lot of your time. You're gonna have to make sacrifices, whether it be girlfriends, jobs, any plans you had. If you have the plan of being a wrestler, that's your plan now. This just eats up your life. Not for everybody. For me, it has. For as long as I've been doing this, I'm still trying to find that balance between life and wrestling. But for the most part, wrestling has consumed a lot of what I do. So just be prepared for anything like that.
And to wrap this up, give this website a conclusion. Vince takes time out of his personal time that he can be relaxing, planning for the next show, doing anything else. And he comes here, he trains, he gives us advice to us. I just want to give a big thank you on behalf of XCCW. I'm sure they all think the same. And of course, thank you for the interview. And would you like to leave the viewers off with anything else?
Oh, I'd love the chance to plug my social media if I could. You could follow me on Instagram at Vinstagram31, Twitter at Vince Valor 31, I'm on Facebook at Invincible Vince Valor. You can also buy my merch over at prowrestlingtees.com/VinceValor31. Great stuff on there.
Alrighty. Now, I'll have that linked in the website, of course. And we're out.
Standing on the edge, battling my head. I'm dying to know if I take this leap.